Hello, my name is James Bowden, and before any comments are made about the video quality, I know all about it. Uh, this is not meant to be a completely professional video. It's just my personal musings and reflections on some thoughts about activities as they are shown, particularly on Nuke Top 5. But as the description says, there are a lot of other content, similar content channels that show similar, very risky behaviors. So, who am I and why should you even care about these? Well, I'm not sure. But what I can tell you is this. Uh, I used to be homeless. I was homeless in Dallas, Texas. I went to the Union Gospel Mission from October of 2017 until January of 28, no, excuse me, late February, March of 2018. Then from 2018, March of 2018 until January of 2019, I was at Dallas Life Shelter in downtown Dallas. I did recover from homelessness, was able to eventually get a job. But even while I was working that job, I was still living at the shelter and still encountering a lot of homeless people. And this will all make sense here in just a moment. So just kind of bear with me. Hang on. Also, when I was living in Tampa, Florida, immediately before I was homeless in Texas, I was living literally within sight, right outside the gates of MacDill Air Base. I mean, I could look out the back window and see over the fence and to the air base. And just a few hundred feet on the other side of the street was a entryway to a park. You go down this paved pathway to a much larger park. And I also was able to live in a couple of different places in the same city of Tampa before I went to Dallas. So I have a lot of personal connection to this and a lot of personal experience with which to draw upon to make these reflections and thoughts. Also, I have been very closely attuned and very much on the borderline in the spiritual warfare, if you will. And all my life, I have experienced, and so have different members of my family experienced different aspects of spiritual warfare, seeing angels, seeing demons. And that's been a very scary thing. So, but I really wanted to lean on the natural issues here at play. A lot of times on Nuke Top 5 and similar content creator channels, you will see people going and exploring structures, abandoned buildings, abandoned houses, abandoned schools. I mean, just the list goes on. A lot of abandoned places and looking for ghosts and spirits or just doing what they call urban exploring. But this can actually be a very dangerous thing. So when I was in Tampa, Florida, I would often go walking at that park and try to lose some weight. And normally I try to do this in the late afternoon, sometimes early evening. But I can remember a couple of experiences, one in particular, one where I felt like I was being followed. And I couldn't tell exactly what was going on, but it was to the side of me, and I could tell, all right, I just need to keep on moving, not stop, just keep going on. Because whatever is following me is just tracking me at this point, maybe not intending to harm me. But late one night, I decided to go for a walk and decided, okay, it's really dark in between. There are not any lights on the pathway, but I've been down it several dozen times. Good grief, I've lost count. So why not? Well, so I went down that path, and just a quarter of a way on that path, all of a sudden I hear this, kind of hissing, screaming noise, and I just automatically froze in place. And uh, then I did a quick about face and ran like crazy out of the path and quickly emerged back. Just as soon as you get to the street, I could look to my left and see the front gates of McDill. It's just within, I could take a stone and throw it, hit it. So I was quite shaken, and I decided never again to do that. And I don't know what it was. I don't know if it was a bird, if it was a crocodile, but more than likely, my feeling was that it was a homeless person. And in the other two places where I lived, I was able to go on walks with the roommate that I had. And we were able to come across several places where there were homeless encampments. And in fact, eventually I did go with my original roommate, and we saw that there were some tents and other places deep on that trail. So on that trail, and then to the left of us, which would have been to the north, there were some tents and some rudimentary places to do different things. And also in the other places with my other roommates, we found similar homeless encampments. So it was actually very unnerving. And I didn't realize the kind of danger that I was exposed to until I was homeless. Now, I say I was homeless. I lived in the shelters. I was very blessed to be able to stay in the discipleship program at Union Gospel Mission in Irving, as well as the discipleship program at Dallas Life Foundation. And obviously, I'm now no longer homeless. Praise God. But during both of those periods, I had moments where I had to leave the facilities and go take care of things, maybe go to the hospital or meet the bus to go somewhere. And one thing that I can remember is that it was very unnerving to meet those people who were still on the street homeless. And during one of the periodic times that we would do this, we would go through and have all of the men unload off the buses, and we would be going through their backpacks and through anything else that they carried with them. And we found knives, shanks, hammers, needles, screwdrivers of all kinds. I mean, just a lot of deadly weapons. And that's when it really hit home to me about how dangerous it could be to encounter a homeless person. And I even remember while being at Dallas Life, I was, this was late into the program, so I had entered the job portion. I was working a job. I was actually a security guard in Richardson. And I was about to get onto the light rail going home, going back to the shelter. I'm just standing there minding my own business. And I made note of the fact that somebody had left their backpack on one of the chairs, so I didn't want to approach it. And indeed, almost out of nowhere, that guy, he came over to me from my left and was like, "You better not get into my stuff. You better not touch that." And I just reflexively backed off and moved even further away, even though I had no interest in this person's stuff, even though I was completely uninterested in what they had. I still gave him the benefit of the doubt and said, "You know what, this is just not worth it. I'm going to move away." Because he could have a hammer, because he could have a knife, a shank, a screwdriver. When you're that homeless, whatever you have, it becomes hyper and super important to you. And I can say that even now, one of the things that scares the living daylights out of me is the thought of homelessness. Going through that again is just a terrible thought. But I'm getting to my point and the relationship to Nuke top 5. When you are homeless and you are able to find shelter in an abandoned building, you have found something very important and you don't want to give it up. And you become territorial and you will want to claim it. And homeless people will claim their territory, which are usually abandoned buildings, with their lives. I see a lot of these content creators driven by a desire for views, clicks, and likes. But let me tell you something. It is not worth your life. If you are out there pursuing likes, clicks, and views, it is just a complete shame for you to put yourself at risk and to willingly go into harm's way and be killed. And when those doors slam, bang, bang, when those hammer strikes hit, when they scream or when they yell or when they say get out, you need to get out. You need to get away because they will kill you. They will hurt you. And it's not worth it. I don't even understand the idea of urban exploring. Maybe I could from perspective of a few years ago when I was a teenager. And I had a few friends, 2 or 3 friends, they had gone into a storm drain. And they were just going to go under the storm drain. It was going to go from, they were going to go from a parking lot to literally across the street into a park. We were in high school at this point. And I remember they showed up at our front door. Chris Beasley, usually the funniest guy you've ever met in your entire life. If you want to get an idea of what he's like, think of Dusty and Philip Seymour Hoffman in Twister. Always ready with a joke, always ready with a smile. Just a real fun-loving guy. But this time he showed up at our front door with his Bible like this. And that was because at that time when they had gone into the tunnel, they had peered down and seen 2 yellow floating eyes that were floating several feet above the ground. So this was not a cat floating back and forth. And it had been rumored that there had been occultic practices and Black Sabbath rituals and other, stuff going on in that tunnel in Richardson, which Richardson, Texas is an interesting kind of venue. It's a very nice suburb, really great city. But it's also been plagued with a lot of drug abuse and drug scandals, sex scandals, and has a very big occultic community or posers. Especially high school kids. And I don't know that it's changed much from when I was a high schooler, which has been a few years ago. We'll leave the specifics undisclosed. But so they showed up at our door, and we were about ready to head out and perform an exorcism. But those plans got spoiled, which now at the time I can kind of understand, okay, that's all right. Now, did we eventually go down through the tunnel? Yes, we did. Did we find anything? Not specifically. We didn't have an encounter. But we did find pentagrams spray painted and all kinds of other stuff painted on the walls through the tunnel. I put my cell phone on Do Not Disturb because I didn't want to get, jump scared here. But in those mine shafts, and some of those caves and some of those tunnels, there are 2 particular dangers. One, those could be places where occult practices, seances, witchcraft, sacrifices, all kinds of stuff could be carried out. And I think that a lot of these explorers don't really understand the spiritual. They don't understand, and they don't really treat the spiritual with respect and with care and caution. Even in the Bible, it talks about not disrespecting demons and not slandering Satan, and how that is actually a sign of brutishness and uh, wrong thinking. These people slander Satan and his demons, and like thoughtless beasts that they are. That's First Peter. Very bad, very loose translation of it. Basically saying, even Christians should not. Whereas we don't worship the devil, and whereas we don't, exalt him in any way, he is certainly a spiritual being, and he certainly has a certain level of power that is greater than human flesh. And we depend on God in order to be protected from that. And when you're going down in those tunnels, uh, you can go into places which become what has been called by a former witch and top bride of Satan, who wrote a book, Rebecca Brown. She talked about claiming legal ground where Satan has a permission to dwell and to remain, and where demons can come to rest and harbor. And even in the place where I live right now, I believe that the former tenant must have had some kind of demonic possession or demonic influence, because I have definitely wrestled with spiritual darkness and forces in this place. And I'm talking a lot about that in a way that I didn't think that or anticipate that I would. But it is very important for me to convey that this stuff really is dangerous, and this stuff really can hurt you. And it's not a joke. And there are a lot of these things which really do exist. Now, some of this might be fake. And sometimes even I have difficulty telling which is fake and which is not, because people nowadays are so crafty and so desperate for likes and clicks and views that they will go to incredible expense and incredible risk in order to get those, as I've already talked about. But also intentionally putting yourself in a place where you could have spiritual harm and spiritual danger is equally dangerous, because of the risk of being harmed, of being physically attacked, also other effects that can carry on into your life. So now, do I watch these programs? I do on occasion. And sometimes I enjoy it, and sometimes it freaks me out, and I turn it off. Actually, probably some of the stuff that concerns me the most are just, again, watching the people going urban exploring. And I want to double back and kind of go back to the storm drain for a moment, because, and this is something that people in Las Vegas, they're homeless and they eventually decide to go live in the storm drain. And we've covered the homeless territorialism, but they have talked about in news reports how suddenly it will start raining. And these people who are living in the storm drains will not only be washed out, but can be potentially drowned because they're caught in a storm. And those storm drains can fill up remarkably fast. Remarkably fast. And if you've got a storm that has started 4 or 5 miles away, that water is going to start surging before you ever know that there is a problem. And many times the storm drains are designed so that eventually there is a narrow point. There's no point at which you could raise your head up. You're just going to end up hitting the roof. And so if you're down there, you could be exposing yourself to a great amount of risk, not only physically in the sense of encountering somebody who's living down there and does not want you there. Also, you could be finding a spiritual risk, but thirdly, you could be putting yourself in danger of being drowned or caught in a very bad situation. And if you are in that tunnel far enough and you are away from your exit and entry point, you could potentially not be able to make it out in time. Water is an incredibly forceful, powerful thing. I've been to the beach a lot, been in a couple of rivers, and just really felt the power of water. Just a few weeks ago, well, I say a few weeks ago, it feels like almost yesterday, but it was about 2.5 months ago now at this point here in the city where I live, which I'm just going to say it's Lynchburg, Virginia. In this city, we had a day, actually almost 2 days, but especially one day where it was torrential rain and it was just one big storm after another, just marching right over the city. And we kept on getting just supercells, almost to where it was purple because it was so heavy of rain. And we flooded here. This basement apartment partially flooded. And I opened up the door and I could just feel this huge rush of water as about 4 or 5 inches of water came in through the door. Now, thankfully, the drain in the kitchen got 90% of the water, and the rest of the water, I'm there with a broom trying to sweep and squeegee into the drain in order to make sure that nothing else is coming in. Had to grab my books and just, run as quickly as possible in order to make sure that they didn't get wet or covered. And so, just seeing how not only powerful that water was and experiencing that, but also experiencing just how fast that water could make it in to my space and how deep it could get was a real eye-opener. And so I just want to encourage you that if you have any other way to create content, especially in that manner, that you would maybe reconsider and think about finding some other way. I know it's not probably as interesting or exciting, but you might actually save your own life and not perish in those situations and circumstances. And so I just wanted to communicate my thoughts on that. I look forward to any comments that are left in the comment section. I would just ask you to respectfully not talk about the quality of the video as far as the film type. I'm using my computer webcam. And I'm just recording this because I have long watched these videos, probably, well, literally as long as they have been up. I don't watch every single one. I do kind of decide sometimes it's not worth watching it. Because these thoughts continue to percolate through my mind and continue to be on my mind and say, you know what, this is not cool, and I'm really worried for these people making these recordings. I have a genuine, heartfelt, brotherly concern. If I were there, I would say, brother, it is just not worth it. And that's basically all that I have to say. Thank you.